All right, good evening, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. We are slowly growing every single night, getting additional students that are sitting in and watching, and so we're doing very well. I think we're up to about 30 already. So we've got a lot of people from all over. So we've got a lot, though, to cover this evening. We're going to be covering Chapter 6, dealing with representing more than one party in a transaction. Okay. So in the previous lectures, you probably recalled, we talked about seller representation, buyer representation. So tonight, we're actually going to be talking about the representing of multiple parties. Okay. So the very first thing that we're going to be dealing with this evening is we're going to be dealing with basically our outline here. As you can see, there is plenty on our outline tonight. So we're going to talk about the path from dual agency to intermediary. We're going to talk about representation of more than one party in a transaction. We're going to talk about intermediary brokerage. We'll also talk about specialized intermediary applications, intentional versus unintentional dual representation, and we're actually not got anything else for tonight. So actually, it's pretty short compared to Friday night's lecture. Of course, on Friday is always going to be the longest of the longest. So, but tonight we're only going to go through these. But again, a lot of information and material we want to talk about. So, the path to intermediary brokerage, of course, is the common law dual agency. And also the statutory dual agency that was enacted in September of 1993. Again, it was removed from TRAILA in 1996. And we also had the intermediary brokerage that was created in January of 1996. Now, there is no common law dual agency that is allowed pursuant to September 5th. Now, before I go into moving forward, I want to explain the differences in what this means. Okay. So, as we talked in previous lectures, we've talked about, for example, Miss Davenport, she decides that she wants to represent Aiden. Okay. If Aiden is selling his home, Miss Davenport is representing the seller. Okay. Mr. Eugene, if you're representing Travis as a buyer, you're a buyer's agent. What this situation is creating is what happens if Miss Davenport is representing Aiden, and then Miss Davenport acquires Travis as a buyer. What happens in this particular situation is this is what we call an intermediary status. Now, in Texas, we do not allow dual agency. Dual agency is where an agent is representing multiple parties in one transaction. And what happens is if Ms. Davenport is representing Mr. Aiden and Mr. Travis, the question is, Mr. Eugene, for you is, could Ms. Davenport truthfully be unbiased in that sale? Think about it. If her expenditures are based upon commission, is she really going to shoot for the lowest price? No. And would anybody do that? No. Most people are going to try to shoot the price as high as they can because the higher it is, the what? The more money in their pocket. Okay. So in this particular situation is common law dual agency is not allowed. We do not want individuals going into this particular situation. We don't want Ms. Davenport basically putting Travis at a disadvantage for her pocketbook. Okay. So, because of that, since Ms. Davenport cannot represent both people, and this particular situation is we created what's called an intermediary. So a real estate agent cannot represent, quote unquote, giving advice to both sides. But they did create this intermediary brokerage where it does this. And this is where it's going to get very tricky on the exam. So you're going to have to follow along with me. When you deal with this, say Miss Davenport has talked to Aiden, okay? Aiden ends up, he is selling his property. Travis is a buyer. If Miss Davenport is a broker, she can either do one of two things. Miss Davenport, you have two things you can do. Number one, say that Mr. Eugene and Mr. Grossman work for you. They're your real estate agents and you're the broker. Miss Davenport can, first option, she can say, Mr. Eugene, I'm appointing you to Aiden. And Mr. Travis, you're going to be appointed to Mr. Grossman. Okay? Now, both of you, agents, are going to represent the interest of those individuals. I, Ms. Davenport, am going to supervise both of you to make sure there's a Chinese wall where there is no confidential sharing of information. Okay? So, that is one method, Ms. Davenport, that you can do. And in that method, Ms. Davenport is able to, by doing that, Mr. Travis can get advice and Mr. Aiden, you can get advice because she's appointed an agent to you. Okay? The other option is Ms. Davenport, if you don't have agents and you are by yourself, you can represent Mr. Aiden and Mr. Travis, but what happens is this is really what you are, and I don't have any paper up here with me. Let me see that real quick. Okay, so what you could do is this. You could go over and say, okay, Mr. Travis, what do you want to offer to Mr. Aiden? Well, Ms. Davenport, what do you think I should offer? I can't disclose that, Mr. Travis, because I have to be basically neutral here. So, Travis, you just tell me what you want to offer, and I'll ship it over to Aiden. So, you can't give him any advice, but you can draft up the contract. After you finish drafting the contract, you give it to Aiden and say, here, Aiden, here is the contract that I just received from Travis. Aiden goes over and he says, well, Miss Davenport, what do you think about this offer? And you have to say, I can't give you any advice because then I would be breaching my duty to Travis. So really what you become, if you're a one broker, is you're just a glorified paper pusher, meaning that you end up, you take an offer from the buyer, give it to the seller. I can't give you any information, seller. Take it back, give it here, and you just basically are back and forth, just handing paper. That's what you are. Okay. Now, is that beneficial? Travis, do you think that that's beneficial by any means? Being a broker that's just giving paper back and forth. I mean, at that point, you might as well do what, Travis? Just let the buyer talk to the seller and just call it a day. Okay. But again, it is that methodology that is dealing with intermediary brokerage. That's why it's not recommended that a real estate broker, being just by themselves, even deal with intermediary status. It's worthless. Okay. Now, what Ms. Davenport you could do, and this is where it gets very tedious in regards to agency. Ms. Davenport, you could have a listing contract with Aiden, list his property, and tell Travis, you're just a customer. I don't represent you. You ain't getting any advice. You're doing it all on your own. My duty is to Aiden. Now, Travis, I'll draft up the contract and all what you want to say, but you're not getting any advice. So in that particular situation, she could do it that way and not have to worry about dual agencies. Okay? But a lot of times, like in my office, I go ahead, we actually have dealt with this a couple of times. I think I've done this with a few of my agents, where I'll end up, buyer calls the office, they want to see Mr. Grossman's listing. I say, okay, let me actually get you with Travis. Let me call Travis and have Travis go show you the listing. Why do you think, Aiden, that I would not want Stephan to show his own listings? What could happen?
He could enter in unintentionally.
He could
enter it into an agency agreement.
That's correct. His actions, if he, say Miss Davenport, that you called our office. Miss Linda answered the phone, and you went over, you talked to Miss Linda, and said, I want to see 123 listing by Stephan Grossman. Okay. Miss Linda says, sure, let me send you to Mr. Grossman. And Mr. Grossman gets the lead. Okay. Mr. Grossman goes out, shows you the property, and he's just being friendly. He's talking to you. Well, how much have you gotten pre-approved for? And how much have you this? And blah, 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 blah. And tell me what you want to do with it. And you spill the beans to him. in regards to, oh, well, I'm approved for 400,000. You know, I know your listing's 400,000. So, but I'm really only going to spend about or offer 350. What's the problem here? Huh? Well, no. What did she just do? She just dumped everything to Stefan, who represents who? The seller. Okay. So, Stefan, if I'm the seller and you just showed my listing to Miss Davenport, and she spills the beans to you that she approved to pay 400, and then you find all this out and she wants to give 350, can you keep that secret from me?
No, I have to tell it all to my seller.
He has to tell me everything that she said. So if she comes in and she spills the beans to Stefan, and I end up finding out the information, guess what happens? When she submits an offer to me for 350, what am I going to do?
Turn it down.
Heck no, she got the money. Turn that down. Turn it down, Stefan. And then he's going to go back to Miss Davenport, say, Miss Davenport, he turned it down, he countered it list price. So then she goes up 10,000 more, counter again, and I'm just going to keep countering her until when?
You get what
Until I get what I want. There's a problem there. Okay? So the key thing is that it's never advisable to be showing the own listing. Because what can happen is that, and this is where the big issue, like Aiden said, if Stefan failed to disclose to Miss Davenport that he represents my interest, say he's in a rush, okay? My agents know that in our life, in our business up here, it's crazy. Our office gets crazy. Today alone, I probably got a crap ton of leads, okay? In that situation, what you got to understand is sometimes Stefan may be running out of the office to go show Miss Davenport that listing, and he's running out there. He gets to the listing, he forgot his IAVS form, and he gets out there, hey, Miss Davenport, come on in, okay, let's look at the property, okay, what do you think? Okay, you can accept, okay, thank you, all right, I'll see you later, I gotta get to my next listing. Well, what happened? Did you disclose anything to her about who you represent? Did you give her the documentation or anything? No. And what happens in that situation, Aiden? Could there be that, what you just said a second ago? If he didn't disclose who he's representing, what did you say earlier? What kind of agency could have been created if Stefan was in a rush and didn't disclose?
That's called implied agency.
It's an implied agency, because now Miss Davenport thinks who's representing her, Miss Linda? Stefan. But who's he actually representing? Me, the seller. See the problem? Okay. So in this situation that's why it's a very important part to learn about this, because most real estate agents do what? What are they trying to get, Travis? How much percentage are they trying to get?
6.
They want to get the full 6. I want the full 6. The more money in my pocket, the better. But what they don't understand is if Miss Davenport finds out after the fact that I knew everything that she told Stefan, what now happens? Stefan gets sued. I could possibly get sued. The broker could get sued. You see how bad this can be? And if it's deceptive where we hit it intentionally for Miss Davenport, now it's 3 times the whole amount. See a problem? Okay? So it's extremely important by all means that as you're doing this, you don't simply, I tell people this all the time, yes, we all want 6%, okay? But I'm just going to tell you, is getting that $30,000 check that you might get off the 6%, is that worth getting the 6% risking that you may get sued for $90,000?
No.
I made $30,000. Yeah, woo, Miss Davenport, I got $30,000 off of you. Then she finds out that she got screwed. She gonna come sue me for what? 3 times because I was deceptive. So now I made $30,000 off of her. She sues me, and now she gets $90,000. See a problem? Well, for you, that's a win-win. For her, it's a win-win. For me, I'm in trouble. No, I know, but it's the truth. Because there's a lot of agents that will do that. They will get out there and purposely sabotage the deal so they can get the whole 6%. You don't do that. You don't do that, okay? So, when representing one party, you have to understand the difference between statutory and common law. I'll make it real simple for you. If you're writing your slides down or taking notes. Under statutory, put black letter law. I'll say that again. Under statutory, put black letter law. Okay. Under common law, put judge-made law. If you've ever taken business law at all, you know these two. Okay? The reason we call it black letter law is because guess what? It's in a book. So they're black letters on a white piece of paper. Okay? So I call it black letter law. Common law, this was way back when judges used to hear disputes and they made a decision. So the difference between the two is, what does the law state versus what the judge interpreted as? Okay. Now, again, both parties must be fully informed. Let me explain this. Miss Leela, how are you this evening, ma'am?
Fine, just got caught off guard.
So I got a question for you real quick, ma'am. How do you feel if Mr. Aiden here tonight, okay? Mr. Aiden here tonight, he comes to you, he's representing you in selling your house, okay? And he's trying to get 6% commission, and he simply says, hey, sign some documents for me. So I just got to have these signed because my broker, Justin, requires them. But what you're actually signing is you're allowing for him to represent you and the buyer, but he doesn't inform you. How would you feel about that if you did not know what you were signing? Say you're in a rush. How would you feel that Aiden's making 6% off of a sale that he got it because it's one of his good friends buying your house? How do you feel about that?
I guess I'd be kind of pissed.
Exactly. Because of the fact is what? You're expecting him to work. Okay? So the key thing is,
But see, for me, that's why I don't ever sign anything. When people start rushing you when it comes to signage, that's major red flag right there in any given situation. That's people like, can I get some time to review? But that's just my tidbit.
And you know what? I hope everybody tonight that just heard that, you remember that. If an agent ever tries to rush you to sign, they're trying to pull a fast one. Okay? They're trying to pull a fast one. Because we have, as duties, as real estate agents, we have a duty to do what? What did we talk about earlier? Who's our interest to, Ms. Davenport? Is it to my pocketbook or to you as my client? You. It's to you, not to me. Because to me,
I was like, I got caught off guard.
yeah, that's fine. In that situation is, Miss Linda,
Yes.
you're my office manager here.
Oh.
What would you do if you found out that Mr. Grossman up here was trying to take advantage of Miss Davenport so he could get his 6%?
I would pull Stephen in the office and have a come to meeting Jesus. Yeah, that meeting.
Well, you might come to my name. Jesus, get over here.
I don't ever want to have that conversation, so.
You know what if Aiden's taking advantage of Miss Leela?
Same thing,
Why are you going to get onto them?
because that's not right.
But they want more money in their pocket.
It doesn't matter what they want, it's what the client wants, right?
Exactly.
Because the client's gonna have to pay that note, and they know what they can afford and what they can't afford, right?
Exactly. Your duty is not to like we talked in the other classes, your duty is not to your pocketbook. Your duty is to your client. Your duty is to make certain that your client is happy. And your duty also is to fully inform them. Okay? I actually was working a deal today. And actually late last night, early in this today, for my own parents to help them with possible dealing with some things for them. And what ended up happening was like I told them. I said the whole concept comes to this point, is that my duty, when they talk to the lender, I referred them to a lender. Did he ever at any point Did he rush you to sign paperwork?
No.
What did he actually say?
Take our time.
Take your time. No rush. Do you need a week? Take a week. Okay? That tells you that that person doesn't care. Now, he did tell them in advance, the longer you wait, the higher what might happen to your interest.
Interest rates.
Your interest rate may rise. So they could take as long as they want, but if you take a very long time, what happens? The interest rate goes up. Okay? So again, you never push. You never push your clients. You have a duty to fully inform them. If I'm representing Leela as the listing agent, and Miss Leela tells me that in this particular situation, Miss Leela tells me that she wants me to sell her house, I need to put in the listing contract and explain to her in the listing contract, when I allow intermediary status, I need to explain to her what intermediary status is. Because Leela is not, if she's a normal seller, is not sitting in my classroom tonight listening to what intermediary status is. She has no idea what that means. She's relying on my knowledge and my expertise to represent her to her best ability. That's what she thinks. But if I can get a buyer, if I happen to know Travis, and I'm like, oh man, Travis buys a lot of properties, investment properties. You know, I got Travis in my back pocket, but I'm not going to tell Leela that at all. I'm going to keep that to myself. So I get her to hurry up and sign the paperwork, and I don't explain it. And then Leela signs the paperwork. And right afterwards, I walk out the door, I call Travis, and I say, hey man, I got you a perfect house you need to buy. What's the problem here? I did not inform Leela, nor did I inform Travis. And then I slide in some paperwork so that they can both sign, and now I get a bigger check. And then when we go to closing, Miss Leela does what? She sees 6%, a big old check to me, and I sold her house in 15, 20 days. She's going to be furious. She's going to be furious.
And you can hit him if you need to, Miss Leela.
Thank you, Miss Linda.
You're welcome.
But the whole thing comes down to it is that you have a duty to inform. My last one that I did in intermediary, I brought my two parties together. And I let them be introduced to each other. Let them see each other. Okay? Simply because of the fact is, they need to see who each other is and who's being represented now. Okay? We have to make certain by all means that you're doing this for the benefit of your client, not your pocketbook. Okay? Very key. Also, the reason that when you're representing two parties, they're going to have two positions. A seller's going to have a different position because what is the seller expecting? Hey, what do they want? The lowest price? The seller will sell their house at the lowest price, right?
No,
What do they want to sell it for?
highest.
Why highest?
They want the most money.
Yeah, because anybody in common sense wants the highest, right?
Yeah.
But the buyer, they want to buy it at the highest, right?
No, correct.
No?
No.
What do they want?
They want to pay the least possible.
They want to pay the least possible. So so you're telling me that Miss Linda, if she's selling her house, and Mr. Travis is buying her house, you mean Mr. Travis wants to pay the least amount, and Miss Linda wants the highest amount?
Right.
So if we put you in the middle, then that'll flip, right? That's how it works? Just because you're there, your presence?
I wish.
No, what happens? What actually happens, Travis, if we put a real estate now involved, an agent involved in that transaction? What happens?
More.
They want more.
They think they can get less to buy the house, and the sellers think they can get more to.
Exactly. So it throws everything into a bigger mess. Okay? That's why it is imperative that you keep your client's interest. You're making certain that you use common sense, okay, in regards to this conflicting position. Because each one's going to have different deals. That's why if in this situation, Miss Linda, you're selling your house, and I'm the broker and Aiden works for me, I'm not going to put Aiden by himself solely in that transaction, even if he has 50 years of experience. Because the fact of the matter is what? There's still two conflicting issues. Okay? There still is. That's why I must take Miss Davenport, let Miss Davenport represent you, Miss Linda, and Mr. Aiden, you represent Travis. And then I do my duty as a broker to keep you two apart and not discuss things. Okay? Now, with common law dual agency, look what this says, Mr. Eugene. What's that word say right there?
Implied.
What's that mean? It's wrote down?
No, it's
You walk over and you tell them?
Implied.
Not telling. It's your actions.
Oh, actually.
Your actions create dual agency. So, like I said earlier, Mr. Grossman representing me as the seller, he's my listing agent. Miss Davenport walks out and she comes over to the property to see my property, and Stefan does not disclose to Miss Davenport that he works for me. Miss Davenport assumes through his actions that she is now represented by him. He has created a common law dual agency because of his actions. Okay? Again, they're undisclosed and non-consensual is what it often is. Did I give you permission, Travis, to represent Mr. Davenport? I mean, I'm sorry, Mr. Grossman. I'm sorry, Mr.
You
Grossman.
did not give me permission.
Did I give you permission to represent Miss Davenport when you're selling my house? No. And did you get her permission to you represent me in the sale?
No.
No. So what just happened? Through his actions, implied agency created through undisclosed non-consensual agreement. Therefore, he has a common law dual agency. Problematic. Why you have to end up, you gotta make certain that you are doing what? You're disclosing the information to your client. Okay? You have a duty to disclose your information to your client. Okay? That's why one of the rules in my office, now not all brokerages run like mine, but in my office, I don't normally like to have an agent that's the list agent show the same property. Because of the thing is that buyers get ecstatic, and while they get ecstatic, what do?
Start talking about stuff.
Talk about it all. And they blab it all. Even if you walk up, and I walk to Miss Linda, and I say to Miss Linda that, here, Miss Linda, here's the deal. I represent Aiden. She's still going to get so ecstatic about the house. What's she going to do, Aiden? Oh, Eugene, guess what? I can buy this house, and we can do this. And remember, Jake said we got approved for this, and blah, 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 da, 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 da. And next thing, guess what happens? She spilt the beans. Now I come to Aiden, and I say, hey, Aiden, guess what? This is what she told me. And deny the offer. She got the money. You got to be very careful with this, okay? You have to be very, very careful. Again, pursuant to September 1st, 2005, intermediary now prevails over common law in Texas, okay? So most of the time, you don't really see the common law dual agency. They deal with intermediary status, okay? Now, the key thing about this, though, is there are oftentimes very volatile issues. Very volatile issues. When there are going to be issues that occur that could possibly create an issue, the plaintiff is normally going to win. Because of the fact is, like we came back here, if I'm selling my property with Stefan, and Stefan goes and talks to Miss Davenport, and I find out all of this information, we are now basically put in a better advantage because we know her cards. Think of it this way. When two football teams play against each other, imagine if this actually happened. Mr. Garrett, you here tonight with me, sir? I guess not. Mr. Keith, you here tonight?
Yes, sir.
I got a question for you, Mr. Keith. So,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Keith, First off, did you ever play football or have family that played football in your life, sir?
My whole family.
Whole family. All right. So let
Yes,
me
sir.
ask you this: how successful of a football team would you have been if you were playing against, we'll say, Coach Eugene here in class, and Coach Eugene had y'all's coach's playbook for every game y'all played against him? How successful would you have been on all your football games?
Not very successful at all.
It basically screwed the whole thing up, right? Because what would have happened? Mr.
Yes, sir.
Every play you're about to play. So in that situation, it ain't a good thing. Imagine if the Super Bowl, if they would have had the game, if the other team had their playbook, it'd have been a completely different football game. Okay? So in that situation, just like Keith just said, is that you have to make certain by all matters, it's not fair for Miss Davenport to tell my agent, Mr. Grossman, it's literally she's doing this. Here, Mr. Grossman, here's everything about me. Now I'm going to go submit an offer, but I'm already approved for $400,000. So I'm going to go submit an offer for $350,000. What's the problem here? She's put at disadvantage. She's the football team that what just ended up happening. Her playbook's been given to the other team. Okay? So it's not going to be to her advantage. Okay? It's actually going to be against it. Therefore, Miss Davenport would win if a lawsuit was put against her or against me. Because the fact is, her playbook has been given to me. It's not fair. Okay? Now, Trayla does have a discussion in regards to when intermediary status is allowed. There are certain times when intermediary status is allowed. And that's if, number one, it is written consent of all parties. I'm going to say that again. If it is written consent of all parties, you've checked off that first box. And now let me explain something. Like Ms. Leela said, it has to be informed as well. So I can't come over here, Mr. Eugene. I can't walk over, hand you a form, okay, Mr. Eugene, and say, sign that form real quick. I got to go, Mr. Eugene. I got 5 seconds. Hurry up, sign that for me. Thanks, sir. Appreciate that. Okay, I got to go. I'll see you later. What's the problem? Did you truly, honestly understand what you just signed? Are you truly having consent? No, I don't have consent. Why? Because of the situation there is no consent of the parties because you were rushed. You don't know what you signed. Okay? So number one, just because it's in writing, they have to understand it. They have to know it. Okay? So number one, written consent. Number two, written consent that actually states the source of compensation. If Miss Leela is involved in this situation, I need to explain to Miss Leela, okay, Miss Leela, I'm bringing Mr. Eugene to your sale, but I want you to understand that you signed a listing contract with me for 6%. Since I am bringing Mr. Eugene and I'm also representing you, I'm entitled to the full 6% sale. Because of that, Miss Leela would now understand why, and now if both of these are checked, we're good. Okay? But Miss Leela, the key thing in this situation is I have to make sure her and Mr. Eugene understand it. Now I'm going to tell you, how often, Mr. Travis, do you think you actually deal with intermediary status in real estate?
You don't really.
No, very rare, very rare. Because of the fact is, most of the time you put a client out, you put their property up for market, and then boom, another agent from another company brings a buyer. That's how it works. However, I've had this happen before. Client goes over, say Travis, we'll just pick on him right now. Travis goes, and I walk over and say, Travis, let me list your property for you. Okay, Justin, sounds great. And I happen to heard that Mr. Keith was looking to buy a property. And your property matches what Keith is looking for. But I don't tell you that because I first want to get you under a listing, and then I go talk to Keith. Okay? And I say, hey, Keith, man, I got a property for you here. I think you might want to come look at this, Mr. Keith. So Mr. Keith says, certainly, let's go look. So I go over, I show Mr. Travis's property. Keith loves it. He wants to purchase it. And by the way, Travis, I did this all within the same day. All within the same day. So I signed that morning with Travis. I get his property under contract, and I immediately bring Keith in. Keith comes in. He loves it. He wants to put an offer in. Now, guess what? When I go sit down to Mr. Travis after Keith says I'm ready to put a contract in, and by the way, me and Keith already drafted up the contract and everything, and I come to sit down with Mr. Travis to discuss it. So I walk over here and I say, hey, Mr. Travis, here is the contract for your property. Awesome. He starts going through it. We get down to the intermediary section, and I say, and also, by the way, here's the intermediary agreement. You're paying me 6%. So you're going to pay me 6% for this transaction because that's what we agreed to in the listing contract. And what do you think in reality Mr. Travis is going to say, Mr. Eugene? Remember, all this happened in one day.
Hold on, we're going too fast. Okay.
No, here's what he's actually going to say.
Whatever, man, sounds good.
Why am I paying you $30,000, Mr. Justin, when you only did like 4 hours of work today?
Yeah.
I'm going to renegotiate this 6% and just pay you 3%. They do that. Clients do that.
They can't do that.
Oh, they will do it.
Yeah.
They will do it. They can't because they signed the contract. But guess what happens? Here's your problem. If I say, you know what, Travis, you still owe me 6%, he could end up not signing the contract. He may say, nope, I'm not going to sign this contract. No, I'm just going to wait for another agent to bring me a buyer. Or he may now have already seen Keith's contact information and say, I want to think about it, I'll get back to you. Guess what he's going to do?
Call Keith.
Call Keith. Hey, man, let's work this out between ourselves. Let's keep Justin out. Okay? Understand when you get in these intermediary relationships, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if they don't pull a fast one on you. Don't be surprised. I had one person before, I sold so quickly, literally it was 2 days it took me. Had a contract sign up, lockbox, put it on the MLS, and boom, found a buyer within 2 days. Boom, found a buyer. Went to the buyer, got a contract put on their table, told them I got it, and I'm ready to sell your house. Let's get it going. And they said, well, you did it so quick. We thought about it. 6% is a lot. How about 1.5%? Because you didn't do much. Oh, I didn't do much? I do about 90 steps before I even put your property on the market. So, yeah, I did a lot. It ain't easy. But to a client, they only see what? They just see from when you sign the paperwork to boom, they now got another one. They didn't see you running the CMAs and running around town trying to get it bound and bind it and getting things together for them and running comps and calling people and all. They don't see that stuff. They just see Mr. Eugene came out, signed a form, and he came out the next day and had a contract. He only needs about $1,000 for that.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you have those type of folks who are like, well, I only want to give you 1%, it goes back to what you originally said, where they just be like, I don't want to give you the 6%, so I'm just not going to sign.
They will try to.
And that's just it.
I will tell you this though, Miss Leland. Okay. If a client ever does that, remember you're an agent right now, so you're a real estate agent. If they try to pull a fast one, remember it's under your broker. So what you would at that point advise the client is, say Travis was that person. I would tell Travis, I would say, Travis, I see what you're saying. Let me get my broker on the phone. Let my broker talk to you. Because remember, the contract's with your broker. And then I would get on the phone, and my first thing to them is, say it is Mr. Eugene that's doing this. I'm going to say, Mr. Eugene, I understand where you're coming in from this. However, please let me explain something. Travis, number one, has ended up, he showed property. He's gone through, he has also ended up, he did about 90 steps just to get your property ready and on the MLS and all of this. He's done a lot. At 1.5%, by the time Travis ends up closing on this transaction, he's got to pay a split with me. He's got to pay his taxes at around 35%. He's also got to pay for any signage, business cards, or marketing materials that he's done. So by the time he's done, he might be making $700. Might. At 1.5%. We did what you wanted. We sold your house very quickly and timely. And so because of this, we're entitled to our 6%. Also, we're not certain this transaction is going to close. We still got to go through the whole appraisal and inspections and everything else. They could back out. So in that situation is, Mr. Eugene, I'm sorry, but I cannot drop commission to 1.5%. I'm sorry. Does that make sense, Lee?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. And I'm loving the questions. Y'all keep up with those. I like those. All right. So the next one. Trayla also has that written listing contract or buyer agency contract may be sufficient. So in some situations, if I have simply a listing contract and a buyer rep with the same brokerage, I may not have to have the additional forms that TAR has. Okay. However, it's always recommended to do what? Get as many contracts as you can sign. Okay. Get as many forms signed as you can, because the more documentation, the more support you have if you get sued. Okay. But I will tell you, clients, especially sellers, for some godly reason, they do not want their seller, the selling agent, to end up getting more than 3%. I still never get this. They would rather, say Mr. Eugene here, he would rather pay 6% total and 3 go to Stefan and 3 go to Leela than pay Leela the whole 6% for procuring her own deal. It blows my mind. Mr. Eugene's fine to give 3% over here to you, Stefan, and 3 to Miss Leela, but it's not acceptable for Leela to get 6%. Okay? People don't understand this. Depending on what real estate brokerage you go for, a lot of companies, they don't understand fully the biggest background part of this. And what I mean by this is a lot of brokerages don't explain to agents how much money you really actually get. When a new agent goes to a new brokerage, especially a bigger brokerage, their very most important thing is this. You ready? They're trying to recruit. Big brokers try to recruit. That's their job. Let's get these people on. But with Ms. Davenport, you say you go with Mr. Stephan here with KW. Say you go to his brokerage here. You go to him, you talk to him. He makes money off of how many people he brings on. Even if you fail, he still makes money. Okay? So he wants to be good. He wants to look good, so he just recruits everybody. But he doesn't tell you how these splits, these commission splits are broke down. See, most brokerages, they may have anywhere from a 50-50 split to an 80-20 split, okay? But the thing is this is what I try to tell everybody. Every business model, they have to make money. Doesn't matter if you're KW, Century 21, Remax, myself, Nobles Realty, it doesn't matter. We all have to make money to operate, okay? But the more commission that you get to keep, guess what? The more they're going to not find you, but charge you in monthly expenses. So I may say, Miss Davenport, I'll give you 100-0 split, but you're going to pay me $1,500 a month. Versus if you end up doing our 50-50 split, you end up, Miss Davenport, you don't pay any monthly fees, and you just pay 50-50 per transaction. So you got to look at this. But say, Miss Davenport, that you were at a 50-50 split. Miss Davenport, she goes over, she talks to Mr. Steffen. Mr. Steffen says 50-50. Well, Miss Davenport, if you're getting 6% commission and you're having to split that with Mr. Grossman, that's still a nice 3% chunk. Okay? But imagine if Mr. Eugene says, man, you did it so quick. Miss Davenport, I'm only going to charge you or give you 1.5%. That's not much. You're getting 0.75 with your broker. Then you got to split that or take that 0.75 and she's got to go pay the government. And then if you did any marketing or any expenses out of your own pocket, you get to take that out. So that's why I tell people all the time is you want to have an experienced person that's with you so that they can sit down and they can break this down to you, to the client. Because if I walk to Mr. Eugene and write all this down, and I say, Mr. Eugene, if we do what you just said, Miss Davenport is at a loss of $500, why would she even want to take the transaction at that point? Versus at 6%, Miss Davenport may be making, $15,000, but now she's got to take cuts and splits and all this other. So now Miss Davenport's around like $4,000. See, a lot of people when they get in real estate, they just think that, they make 6% or 3%, and they think that just all goes in their pocket. No, there's splits. Broker gets their cut. If you're in a franchise, a lot of people don't understand that. You get in a franchise, your broker gets their cut, the franchise gets their cut. If you're on a team, the team gets their cut. I've had one agent that I spoke to that I wanted to come on with my firm, and I'm very selective on that, very selective on who I bring. But I was talking to this lady, and she told me, she said she works for this big firm in Houston, big name firm, but she told me, she said after all the splits are occurring, if it's a $10,000 commission, she walks away about $1,500, and then she has to take out all of the marketing and taxes and everything else. So by the time it's done, she may make $900, $800. So in those situations commission is very key. It's very key. And that's why a lot of people at a bigger firm, they try to do this intermediary because 6% gives them a little bit more money. Versus Travis, who's with my firm, in this situation, Travis, he can take a lower cut because he's not having to split with a team member and a franchise member and all these other things. He's getting the 80 split. He's cutting with his broker. He splits that. Okay. So in those situations you got to kind of look at these, but there are the reasons why we use intermediary. Another one, Track Rule 1101.560. It's associated license holder acting as an intermediary. A broker may appoint licensees to communicate with and carry out instructions of their assigned party. What I said earlier, I can appoint an agent to a client. I've done that before. Okay. The written consent is required from both parties, and all parties must be notified in writing. And the appointed licensees can give opinions and advice to their assigned party. Okay? So by all means in these situations, we have to make certain that as we're going through these, we have to watch how these are broken down. Okay? Very important. Now, the broker acting in an intermediary position or capability may not. And this comes back, so this first one here, 560, right here, correct, 560, is talking about me having multiple people with me. So like myself, I have 25 agents that are underneath me. I'm able to appoint people out. Does that make sense? But if I was by myself, then I would fall under this, where I'm acting as an intermediary, but I may not disclose the buyer's negotiating position to the seller. I may not disclose the seller's negotiating position to the buyer, disclose any confidentiality, treat all parties honestly, and I cannot violate trade law. So in this situation is unlike this slide right here under 560, if I have agents underneath me, I can appoint them. Now this comes back to that situation of this. Let me say this kind of situation here. Yeah. Who is it?
Does Keith have a question?
Keith, you got a question, bro?
Oh, no question.
Okay. Okay,
Sorry.
good, you're good. All right, so in this situation, like I was saying just a minute ago, okay, under this, what happens is you got to be very, very careful when you're dealing with this, is you got to make certain that as you're going through these things and you're having these discussions, it's important that you are ending up your benefit, you're representing your client. You're not representing yourself, and you're not trying to keep all the money to yourself. This kind of comes back to what I was trying to say just a minute ago. When you are looking for a broker, because I've seen this happen before, guys and gals, okay? It's happened to some people that have came on to my team before. They came to my firm because of what happened at another firm. But what happens in this particular situation is you want to have a broker that is non-competing. You don't want to have a broker that competes, okay? And what I mean by that is, Mr. Eugene, we're going to say that you work for me, okay? And Miss Davenport, you work for me too. Okay, you are my agents. I end up, if I'm a competing broker, I may list Stefan's property. Say Stefan's property is $3 million. I list Stefan's property for $3 million. Now, if I'm listing your property, Stefan, how much commission am I got on the line right now? 3 or 6? I have 6 because I'm listing it. Okay, so if I bring the buyer, I get 6%. Okay, so Mr. Eugene and Miss Davenport, y'all go out and y'all are trying to market, and y'all spend y'all's own money to try to drum up some lead to come buy Stefan's property. And so, Mr. Eugene, you run into Travis. And you show Travis, and Travis is like, man, I love that house. I want to buy that house. Okay? So you draft up a contract, and you send it to me. And I get your contract. And I have the contract, and I see it, and I'm like, whew, man. If I go over and I cut Eugene out of this, I get 6%. Or if I keep Eugene in it, I only get 3. What am I going to do to Eugene, Miss Davenport? I'm probably going to do what to him? Give him the, what do they call it? The boot. Give him the boot. That's right, yeah. Bye, Mr. Eugene. You're fired. You've been terminated all of a sudden. Bye-bye. Hey, guess what, Stefan? I got Travis. Let's do the transaction. When it's all said and done, what happens? I'm on the way to 6%.
I get nothing.
You get nothing.
I did all that work.
And you did all the work, spent the money, and you try to sue me, and guess what happens? Sorry, all listings and business is in whose name? Your broker. That's what happens when you deal with a competing broker. A non-competing broker like myself, if Miss Davenport grabbed Stefan and you grabbed Mr. Travis, I don't care, because the fact is what? We're all going to make money in this transaction. So why should I be greedy and try to take it all and keep it to myself when I can just spread the wealth amongst everybody? That's how it should.
And he only does that to the people he doesn't like. So
Yeah.
Only the agents he doesn't like, he can't count.
That's right.
Yeah.
By the way, Miss Davenport's the new enforcer.
I'm hanging on. I'm hanging on. I'm barely making it.
But by all means, like I say, is that yes, you want to make certain that your broker that you're with is actually going to end up, they're not going to kick you to the curb. Y'all, I've seen it happen before. I've actually had an agent come to my firm from a bigger firm because the fact is, this person got a list or got the buyer, and they didn't want to pay that agent 3%, so they gave her the boot, so they could keep all the money. And I'm not saying all brokerages are like that. Do not get me wrong there. There are many brokers that are like me, that are non-competing brokers. But the thing is that I always have said that it works to the benefit, because I've worked for a few brokers while I was an agent, and the thing that I just saw was it was just simpler having a non-competing broker. Because what happens in that situation is if Travis or Stefan need to talk to me about something, they don't have to be concerned that if I go talk to Justin, then he may fire me so that he can get more money in his pocket. That's not how I meant this. It's meant so that both of them can be confident enough to come talk to me. We solve the problem, and they don't have to be worried about, oh crap, I can't talk to Justin, so I'll just make a guess and then get me sued. Rather, we all talk about it and everybody gets some money.
He knows I'll beat him up too.
Yeah, Travis will beat you up. You gotta watch out.
I'll beat him up.
That's why I have this this little lecturer here on podium. Yeah,
I have a question.
yes, ma'am.
Is it possible if you go to these other brokers and let's say they start or give the indication that it's non-competing and then they turn around
Yes, ma'am.
and get you? So
Yes.
there's nothing that you sign that indicates that they would actually keep to the non-competing component. You're just really having a discussion.
Well, it depends. In my office, I actually have an additional addendum that's in my contract that states that I do not compete. Now, of course, there is a little exception to it. Like, for example, if we have too many leads in the office or too much business, that I may get in. But I normally, if I'm going to compete, I will not compete in the same transaction, if that makes sense. So
Okay.
what happens in mine, now again, this is just me, but in my contract, like say I have 20 agents or 25 agents. Say every one of those agents has 10 people they're working with, okay?
Well, then you don't need to do anything.
Well,
You're good.
yeah, I mean, I'd be good if
You're
that's
good.
going on, right? But if every one of them had 10 deals and I still have 10 more leads that are out there, I may jump in and show those other 10 people. But what I'll do is, as they say, Miss Leela, that you finished up 2 clients in 2 weeks, then at that point, I would come in and say, hey, Leela, I have 2 clients I'm working with. I'm going to appoint them to you, and you finish them out for me. So instead of me kicking them out of my office and giving them away to somebody else, I'll handle them until another one of my agents clears up, and then I'll give it and assign it or point it off to another agent, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. And again, I don't want anybody thinking I'm trying to bash another firm. That's not what I'm trying to do. I just want to give you, when you go in and you interview, okay, you need to know these little things, because these little things help you find the best firm you're with. Like I told Miss Davenport, I told her from day one, I don't care if you go to another firm. I would rather have good rapport with you so that when you are with that other firm, I still can end up doing transactions with you. I'd rather have us on good terms than ending up you're with somebody else and we have bad terms. I've been teaching for 9 years, almost 10 years. I've been teaching real estate. I have taught majority of the agents in this area, if not probably even outside of this area. I don't have no issue with any of them. I've taught many students. And some of my best friends that I talk to that are agents are with the bigger firms. I have no problem with that. But I'm also will tell you is, you just got to be aware. That's what I'm trying to express to y'all. Be aware of what you're going into. I don't want, say, Miss Davenport going in just knowing the content, but not knowing what else could happen after the fact, if you see what I'm saying. I want you to see the big picture of everything, so when you go into interview, you're prepared, not only from the knowledge, but also from the practical side, if you see what I'm saying. Okay. All right. So how does this appointment process work? Well, it's advice and opinions from the appointed licensees. Okay. So again, this is where I, as a broker, step in. Okay. This is where, like I said, Mr. Eugene, you're representing Travis. Ms. Davenport, you talk to Stephen. Understand, is me being a non-competing broker, I don't know Travis or Stephen. Y'all are meeting with them. So that Stephen or Travis would never have seen me until this point. Okay. This is where I step in as a broker for you. And I then say, okay, Ms. Davenport, Mr. Eugene, can you get your clients together and we need to meet at the office? Or let's meet by Zoom, whatever works, okay? And then at that point, I come in and I basically go through this. I'm going to say, Mr. Grossman, It is in my understanding that you want to list your property, and you've been working with Ms. Davenport. Is that correct? Yes. Mr. Travis, it's under my understanding that you've been working with my agent, Mr. Eugene. Is this correct? Yes. Okay. Now, it is also my understanding, Mr. Eugene and Ms. Davenport, that your client, Mr. Eugene, wants to put an offer in on Ms. Davenport's listing. Is this correct? Okay. All right. So, Mr. Grossman, is it fine with you that you continue to work with Ms. Davenport? Yes. Travis, are you good with continuing to work with Mr. Eugene?
Yes.
Okay. Since both of you have been aware of this, my firm is going to represent both of you. Since my firm is representing both of you, we would be entitled to 6%, Ms. Davenport, or Mr. Grossman, because of the fact is, Ms. Davenport signed with you, she has representation to you, and you said you would pay 6%. Now, because of this, Mr. Eugene and Ms. Davenport, I have to build a Chinese wall between y'all, and Ms. Davenport, you cannot tell Mr. Eugene anything, and Mr. Eugene, you cannot tell Ms. Davenport anything. Do you understand me here? As long as everybody understands that, then we will continue with this transaction. Both of you will continue to be appointed to this person unless I deem otherwise, and it will continue until closing. Okay? So I have just appointed who and when, how long it's going to be, written notification. Y'all would have to have everything signed before we left, and to be appointed, there has to be written consent to act as an intermediary, and the appointments have to be made. That's why there has to be 2 associates. That's the agents. Okay? I can never do this as a broker. I can never say, Mr. Eugene, I'm representing Stephan as a broker, and you're representing Travis. Why is that? Why, Mr. Eugene, can you not go up against me and I can't go up against you?
He's an extension.
He's an extension of me. He is an arm. That's what I always tell people. When you talk about agents, imagine a human body, and every agent is an arm off of me. Okay? So, Mr. Eugene, if you are representing, if I'm going up against you, that's like me taking a knife and cutting my own arm off. Not beneficial. So you have to have at least 2 associates and a broker for there to be the appointment process. So if a broker only has 1 agent, can they ever do intermediary? No. No. What would have to end up happening is if Eugene were my only person, and it was Travis and Mr. Grossman, one of them would have to be a customer. Okay? One of them would have to be a customer. Now this is the intermediary form. That's what the form looks like. Okay? This form basically states who the seller and landlord is going to be, the prospect, the broker's firm, the address of the property, the date, who the broker is going to appoint, signing date at the bottom. Does that make sense? This is the form that you have to have everybody sign. Okay? The key point in this situation is it lets the parties know who they are going to talk to. So, Mr. Stephan, because you're the owner, you're going to talk to Ms. Davenport. Mr. Travis, you're the prospect, you're going to talk to Mr. Eugene. Mr. Travis, you are never allowed to talk to Ms. Davenport, and Mr. Stephan, you're never allowed to talk to Mr. Eugene, period. This is the first and only time y'all will talk. Okay? Other than that, Ms. Davenport will be your sole contact, and Mr. Eugene will be your sole contact, period. Okay? So this kind of shows you that nice little chart. When you're representing only the seller, not the buyer, if you notice the line, the solid line from broker to seller client, look at that line. It's nice and what? It's solid. While with the other line from broker to buyer, it's dashes. Because this buyer is a what?
Customer.
A customer. So if they're a customer, do you owe them opinions, advice, and things to that nature? No. Okay? So the only person I owe responsibility to is the seller. Okay? Now, as you see here at the bottom, who has more preferential advice and treatment out of the seller and the buyer? The seller. Why? Because who's in their background? Who's in their corner? The broker. I'm in their corner. Because the fact is, I have a representation. So this would be that situation where I have one associate or I'm by myself. This is what I would use, okay? Now, if I'm an intermediary, now what's happened here? The lines turned what?
Solid.
They're both on both sides, they're solid. So I'm the broker in the middle, solid line here, solid line here. Now here's the question. If I'm going to stay in this situation, do you see any appointments? No, who's the only person involved in this? Just me. So I can be an intermediary broker, but Ms. Davenport, I want to ask you this question. Since there's no agents involved and it's just myself, and you're the seller, and Mr. Grossman's the buyer, can I give you any advice? Can I give him any advice? What am I basically? A glorified what? Paper pusher. Because what happens is I take whatever you tell me and I give it to you, and whatever you tell me, I just basically say I can't help you, and I just go back and forth. How'd you like that? Go to a lawyer. You go hire an attorney. Judge or attorney, can you give me advice? No, can't tell you nothing. I know you're on charge for capital punishment, but I can't help you. I know you're about to be killed, but I can't help you. How'd you like that? No, not by any means. So in this situation, there's no opinions to anybody. Zippo, nada. Okay? There's a problem with that. This is basically a way, and this is why personally, a lot of people may counter with me, but personally I hate this one. Because the fact is it's basically the brokers getting all the cash, putting it in their pocket and walking away. And the clients is getting nada. No help, no advice, no opinions, nothing. So they might as well just cut off the broker altogether and just go on the transaction themselves. The only difference is they're just paying for me to put my name on some documents. At 6%. Okay? So very important on that one. Now this is what's called an intermediary with one associate and without appointments. So if you notice here, it's an intermediary broker, but here, Mr. Eugene, you're the sales associate, and you're representing the buyer, but we're also representing the seller. Well, what did I say earlier? Can the broker ever go up against the sell agent? No. So again, can we give any advice, opinions, or anything to either client? Nope. Even though, Mr. Eugene, you're a sales agent, you know a bunch, you can't tell Ms. Davenport anything? No, because the fact is what? Who's the listing amongst? Still with the intermediary, the broker. So in that situation, a sales agent can never go up against their broker. So again, this previous one we just talked about just rolls over here. Same thing. All we're doing is we're just adding one more person to the mix. So again, this is still, instead of it just going from me being in the middle of, okay, Ms. Davenport gave me some paper, now I give it to Stephan. Now we've just done this. Ms. Davenport gives it to you, you give it to me, I give it to Stephan, and back around. We just add more people for no reason. That's pretty efficient, right, Travis?
Oh yeah. The more people, the better.
The more people, the better, right?
The less chance for a problem, the more people ask.
Yeah. That's how it works at the DMV, right? The more people, the more efficient they run, right?
Yeah, right.
Any governmental office, right? They just run so perfectly, right?
Oh, God.
Listen, that's where we've been failing, Travis. We need more people. Man.
That's more hands in the pot.
That's right. The more people, the more money you got to spend now. Okay? Now, Mr. Eugene, I got a question from here for you. What happens in this particular situation? Now, this is a little bit, a little different. I'm going to trick you here.
Yeah.
Now we have two associates. But what's happening there? A lot of people make this mistake on the test. They say, well, on this one and this one, you can't give advice. So you can't give advice here, can't give advice here. But wait a minute, we added another associate, and Mr. Noble said that if there's another associate, now we can give advice. Why can't you give advice?
Still under the immediate broker, still in your
What's this part right here?
appointments.
Have I appointed
No.
these two? No.
If you appointed
This is like Miss Davenport just happened to run into Stephen, and Mr. Eugene, you happen to run into Travis, and y'all just happen to be talking.
Yeah.
We don't have appointments, we don't have contracts. It still
comes.
comes to me. So in this situation, we're still in the same because we don't have appointments. Don't let that trick you on the test. They will get you there. Because there is not appointments, doesn't matter. Okay? Now,
Now you got.
look at this. So you come back here, you see this, now you jump over here. Now I have appointed an associate. I have appointed Miss Davenport to Stephen. And I have appointed Mr. Eugene to Travis. Now, Mr. Eugene, can you give Travis opinion?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Miss Davenport, can you give Stephen opinions? Yes. Because what's happened?
We're appointed.
Y'all are appointed in this situation. You look back up here, y'all just are talking. Here, you've actually ended up, you have been appointed by your broker. So your broker is no longer the intermediary. You've now had an appointed process. So I have appointed Ms. Davenport to Mr. Grossman. Mr. Eugene, you've been appointed to Mr. Stahl. And me, that's why they still put me in the middle. I am that Chinese wall between y'all. Because I got to make certain that Ms. Davenport isn't trying to call you and asking you, Mr. Eugene, how much is Travis approved for? And Mr. Eugene, I got to make certain that you're not talking to Ms. Davenport saying, how much will Stephen sell for? What's his lowest figure? Can't do that. Okay? So that's where you have that difference here. Now watch this one though. Look at here. So this is going to throw a few people. Now we have one sales associate. Back here, I had one sales associate. But look at the difference here. This sales associate was only working with who? One person. Okay? You come back over here, now we got this situation. This comes back to when we first started at the very beginning. Mr. Grossman is ending up, so here we go. Mr. Grossman's representing me. Y'all remember, Mr. Grossman was representing me. I'm the seller. And Miss Davenport wanted to come see the property. Miss Davenport talks to Stephen, and Stephen gets Miss Davenport to sign a buyer rep when he's already had me sign a rep. Well, what's happened? My associate is working with the seller and the buyer. And because of that, Stephen cannot give any advice, and he's now locked me into where I can't give any advice. So in this situation, not a good thing. This is where as a broker, it can be concerning. Very concerning. Because now I got to come in here and figure this stuff out. Okay? So when you have two clients, you have to owe them both a duty of opinion. Remember we talked about that in the seller and the buyer part. We have to owe them both knowledge. Now, Mr. Grossman, because he did what he did, you've locked me into a contract. And so in that particular situation, guess what Mr. Grossman has now done? He's now he's locked me into a contract, and I can't do nothing. So my clients are up the creek without a paddle. Okay? So what's the status of what's called an appointed brokers? An intermediary is basically an agent. It's where they different duties for a single agent. Okay, there are different requirements for single agents. There's also a limited form of representation, and there's also certain fiduciary duties. However, a broker may not opt out of any duties. When you have a client, when Mr. Grossman has signed myself and Ms. Davenport as clients, the broker cannot just simply opt out of fiduciary duties. Wouldn't that be nice, Travis? Imagine this. You go to court and you're about to go on death row, and your attorney goes up there and he's about to lose the case, and he goes, "Oh, not it. I'm not it. Time out. I'm not it."
Let's go.
Right? Wouldn't that be nice? No, you can't do that. Or if you're about to get sued, oh, time out. I gotta quit. Gotta get out of here, right? No, you can't do that.
What's replacement?
Yeah, you can't do that. Sorry. You gotta, you're stuck, okay? A lot of people think that brokers can simply just get out of it. They can't. Once you're signed with the client, you're with the client, okay? Some of the concerns that are often related to intermediary practice, of course, the most important one is, what are the ethical and legal problems? If it's not done correctly, you can end up getting yourself in a lot of trouble, and the brokerage in trouble. A lot of people, unfortunately, guys and gals, I want to tell you, don't understand agencies. One of the number one part of the exam that people fail is this class. They get their license, they get out there, they start practicing, and they start just signing anybody up. Sign, try to get all 6%, because you got to understand something. Like Mr. Eugene said, the more hands in the pot, that means the more money you got to get, so you get something. And if you're a new agent, you just got your real estate license, and you're out there and you're joining a big firm, a franchise firm, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people, hands in the pot. Because of the fact is, the broker wants the money, the team lead, God forbid if you're on two teams, okay? The franchise wants some money, the government wants some money, and most of these firms also don't pay for your business cards or your riders or your signs. They don't pay for those things. So in those situations is, you spend a lot of money, so you've got to end up getting an intermediary status. You've got to keep it together. But the problem with this situation is when you're dealing with these particular areas, what happens? What's the bad thing about it? Well, let's think about this. Let's use common sense here. Is that if you end up in that particular situation, you're having to get out there and you're having to get as much money as you can, are you always going to play by the rules? No, you're not. Okay? So the advice and opinions may be a problem. It may be a problem. Okay? Are appointees equally qualified? Think about this. She's this way. Miss Leela, she ends up, she gets her real estate license. Miss Davenport, you've been doing real estate for 20 years. Okay? Miss Leela just got her real estate license. She signed up with the big name firm. Okay? She gets out there, she's with the big name firm, she just got her license. She just went to, say, a college, because colleges are always more expensive. She goes to a college, she spent $5,000 to get her real estate license. Okay? She then joins the local association. It's another $2,000. Then she's working for a big firm, so she's got to end up spending another $250 a month, and she's got to pay her dues with the MLS and everything. She's got to spend a lot of money. A lot of money. Now, Miss Davenport, you've been in this for 20 years. You probably have a nice chunk of change set to the side because you've been in this for a long time. Okay? So, Miss Davenport, you have a listing. And you have this listing for $400,000. Mr. Eugene, Miss Leela comes up to you. She works for the same firm that Miss Davenport does. She comes up to you, Mr. Eugene. She says, you know, you want to see this house? And you're like, certainly, I'm going to go see this home. So you go out there, she shows you the home. She finds out that you're approved for the exact $400,000 that Miss Davenport's listing for. You tell Miss Leela, I want to offer $350,000. Okay. Do you think Miss Leela is really going to negotiate on your behalf to get her down to $350,000? Why do you say that? Why do you say no?
She wants to get $400,000.
She needs to get that $400,000 so she can get that commission.
That's right.
Because if she gets you to $350,000, what's going to happen?
She's gonna make less.
she makes less and she's got to pay her franchise and her broker and her team lead and all these other people. She needs it as high as possible. So is Miss Leela truly equally qualified with Miss Davenport? No, she's not. So again, you've got to look at these situations that's another situation. Also, is there training? Has Miss Leela truly been trained enough to understand this? But see, the problem is a lot of times they're not. They're not involved in this because the fact is they're watching the money. Because Miss Leela needs that money to pay off her debt. If you see what I'm saying. Okay. So again, very key issues there. Now, of course, there's also this standard or specialized intermediary. They have things like exchanges, syndications, commercial leasing agents. These are all different areas that you can work in real estate. Now, I will tell you, a lot of students ask me this every semester. Do I have to get a separate real estate license to sell commercial real estate? Nope, you don't. Your real estate license allows you to do commercial and residential. Okay, so you can do everything that's real estate related. However, Travis, do you think it's wise that, say, Mr. Keith, who just passed his real estate exam, should go start working on commercial deals?
No.
Why is that?
Usually it's a lot more complicated. Usually those people are a lot more.
They would
They
eat him
know
alive.
they know what they're doing a lot more than just people
Yes.
trying to buy their first house. So.
Exactly. A commercial person is most likely either had a master's degree in real estate or they've been in real estate for so long that it's not funny. Okay? They know what they're talking about. Okay? So very key in those situations. Now, what's this deal between intentional and unintentional? Okay? Well, the first thing we want to look like is unintended dual representation occurs when one licensee represents both the buyer and the seller. Okay? It's oftentimes that in-house represents both the buyer and the seller. Other broker represents the buyer and acts as the seller's sub-agent. The licensee acts as the buyer or seller, or the written agreement with the seller, but only a verbal agreement with the buyer. These are where you can run into these issues. Okay? You've got to make certain by all means that you don't allow this to happen. Now, do you think, Mr. Eugene, that people intentionally forget stuff?
No.
No. Travis, could you happen to have a hiccup one day and make a mistake? Could I have a hiccup as a broker? Could I make a mistake?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not perfect. I'm human. Okay. So in those situations you go through here, you're not going to be perfect. Okay. But you have to understand that you have to try to limit these. That's why you always have multiple checks and balances in place so people are watching it. Okay. Now the potential problem areas occurs in these spots. If you have a prior relationship with a client, say I've been representing you, Travis, for 20 years, I may end up being more relaxed and laid back with you because I've been doing transactions with you all the time. Okay? But guess what can happen? If I've been doing transactions with Travis forever, and I go over here to Miss Davenport and I get her listings, Miss Davenport, do you really give a crap that I've done relationships with Travis before? If I'm trying to sell your house? Nope. You want me to do everything by the book, right? So it doesn't matter that I'm buddy-buddy with Travis. She wants it by the book, okay? Another area like we talked about, in-house sales. A lot of brokerages, doesn't matter big or small, a lot of brokerages push for in-house sales. There are some brokerages that will not show other people's listings. They will only show listings in their own place, period. Now, do you think that's in the advantage of you, Mr. Eugene, if Mr. Travis only shows the brokerage's listings? No. See, a lot of people think that they don't see this, and I've seen this happen before many times, not just once or twice, but many, many times. There are brokerages they will call to get more information on a listing. Say that you call Mr. Grossman up here and he's with a large firm, okay? You call Mr. Grossman and you happen to see Miss Davenport's listing and she's with another large firm, okay? You call Mr. Grossman to get more information because when you're looking online, it just sent you to Stephan instead of Mr. Grossman, instead of Miss Davenport. And you go over here and you call Stephan and Stephan says, oh yeah, that house, I think it's about to go under contract. However, Mr. Eugene, we've got a lot of in-house listings that we can show you. Are you truly getting represented fairly? No, because what's happening? What happens if Stephan only has, say there's 5,000 listings. Stephan only has 500. Are you truly being represented fairly?
No, it's another 4,500.
You're missing the other 4,500. And he's going to push you to what? To sell in-house so that they can keep the money amongst themselves.
Good job, Stephan. Having 500.
I'm telling you, Stephan's on a roll up here.
He's on top.
Yeah, I'd be set with 500.
He'd be retiring. He'd be retiring.
Game over.
Hey, it's 500 with your best one. Now, again, your in-house sales, you got to be very, very careful with, okay? You just got to be careful. I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, do not, all the information I'm giving you, like I said, I'm trying to be practical, and I'm also trying to tell you real life. But I'm not saying that Ms. Davenport should not go out and try to market her own listing. You have a fiduciary duty to do that, okay? But I'm saying if you're going to do this, be careful how you do it, is what I'm saying. If you can get 500 listings, Ms. Davenport, and sell all 500 yourself, girl, you need to come work for me forever, okay? Because we will all be set financially. So, but I mean, again, it's not against the law. You just need to play it by the book, okay? Cooperating or other brokerages. You got to be careful with this because there also is issues if you are showing other houses with other brokerages. There could be issues with that too. Broker as the principal. This is that big part right here where I was talking about you need to be aware that your broker is not competing. Because if your broker is the principal of a transaction or their spouse, parent, or child, there could be problems. Because the broker, it being the principal, is ultimately over the agents. There's a huge issue. That's why you don't want your broker being a competing broker, okay? Because if I get a listing, say, Ms. Davenport, I'm listing your house, and Travis brings Mr. Eugene to me, guess what? Mr. Eugene, you can't get any recommendation whatsoever or advice because the fact is Travis is coming into me. So if I was crooked, what would be the best thing for me to do in this situation? Bye, Travis. Eugene, you're now a customer, and we're going to represent Ms. Davenport. Okay, you got to be very careful with those. Adopting a buyer. Adopting a buyer. Stephan, you know about adopting a buyer. You're doing great right now, right? Don't ever adopt a buyer. Don't ever adopt a buyer. Okay, buyers, you have to do it all. Yes, that's why they use the word adopting. Okay, be very careful. Okay. Also, when dealing with non-agencies, okay, you don't want to deal with that. We don't want to waste our time on open listings or stuff like that. It's just not part of your time. You don't have time to chase that, okay? So, our key points for this evening. Remember, the dual agent role is not authorized. The broker must agree to act as the intermediary if the broker agrees to represent a buyer or tenant and a seller or landlord. So, this means, key word there, broker must agree. Just because Ms. Davenport met Mr. Grossman and Mr. Eugene, you met Mr. Travis, and Ms. Davenport, Mr. Eugene, you're under my license, does not automatically mean that I agree to represent them. I may not agree to represent them at all. I may simply say we're going to leave it where we're just going to be a paper pusher. That's it. Okay? I have to agree to allow that. Okay? In-house sales are permitted if the buyer is a customer. Let's say that again. In-house sales are permitted if a buyer is a customer. What's the problem with that? Travis, if Mr. Eugene walked in the door today and he wants to see your listing, okay? Can Mr. Eugene get any advice from anybody in the firm? If it's an in-house sale? He's a what?
He's a customer. Yeah.
So if he's a customer, can he get any advice? No. So Mr. Eugene, are you really getting your interest looked after?
No.
No.
You wrote me.
Do you think agents know the difference? Most agents know the difference between this. Nope. Most real estate agents, they simply go through these little fast track trainings and they get their license, and you ask them, what's the difference between a client and a customer? What are you talking about? Everybody's a client. They're not clients. I had one agent I spoke to a while back. I said, do you know the difference between a client and a customer? They're like, well, a customer goes to Walmart and a client's who we represent. And I was like, how did you get your license?
Is that what they said?
Oh yeah, that's exactly what they told me. There are some people that are out here that don't know the difference. And then they go represent their client, supposedly quote unquote client, and then breach contracts and have an undual agency. Okay? Again, intermediary fiduciary duties do differ. Gotta look at it. That's why you gotta have, that's one thing I'm gonna tell you. Again, I want to give you this information because it's very important. When you are interviewing for a position, anywhere, you need to make certain that you look at this not from so much as, say, Mr. Davenport, that you were coming to work for me. Okay? Ms. Davenport, you come to work for me. Don't come into the interview as I need to see what, or like a hiring interview. Don't come in like a normal job. Like, I'm looking to do this. No, 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 no. This is the difference. In real estate, you need to be asking, Mr. Nobles, what can you do for me? Not so much what can you do for me, but what can I do for you? Okay? Because I'm your broker. So what am I going to give you? See, there's a lot of places, and it's sad to say, there's a lot of places that they have like a office manager or a team lead or some other assistant or associate that interviews. And you'll ask them, well, where's the broker at? Oh, well, our broker's in Dallas, but we're here in Houston. Or our broker is in New Mexico, and he just has his license here. You want to make certain that, like I always say on anything else, like lenders and everything else, you want to make certain that you can walk in and either hug your broker or slap your broker. Travis does a lot of the latter. Okay. So, but again, you got to make certain that you have these situations. Okay. Now, you also need to introduce the possibilities of intermediary as soon as possible. As soon as possible. The intermediaries offer reduced services, of course, to all members. It actually is not beneficial. Okay. Oftentimes, in my personal book, I try to discourage intermediary as much as possible. Okay. But again, depending on where you work, it's different. Everybody's different. Intermediaries may be best for in-house. Sometimes in-house transactions, they can be the best. But again, you got to watch these points. So if you're going to be a broker, or if you're working for a broker, you need to ask your broker, do y'all have an office policy? And what exactly is the policy? Explain to me what the policy is. The policy needs to be in writing and not just verbal. Again, strong training programs are critical. And those trainings need to be by the broker or somebody that's been in the business a very long time. Every broker out here will promise you that you'll get leads, you'll get trainings, you'll get all of this. But very few, I'm probably the only one in this area that's actually teaching classes and teaching my agents at 7 o'clock at night. Okay? Most brokers, they simply just sit in their office, come in a couple hours a day, and they gone. You don't even have their phone number. Okay? You got to make certain that there are trainings that are actually somebody that knows what they're doing. Okay? You need to discuss with the sellers the net effect of the various types of offers. You need to explain to them how to do net sheets. You need to show how this works out. So I'm going to start off here with, is Garrett on tonight, Mr. Stephan? Garrett, can you hear me? Mr. Colton,
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, there he is. Mr. Garrett, question for you.
Yes, sir.
As an intermediary, what duties do you owe to the buyer and to the seller?
To not favor one, like not try to get one person a better deal than the other.
Okay. Mr. Eugene, do you agree with that? Not to favor one over the other?
Well, you don't know these, because all you're doing is push paper around.
So basically, if you're an intermediary and it's a broker by themselves, yes, you're just going to be ending up, you're basically just pushing papers. That's correct. Miss Leela, what services can you provide as an appointed licensee in an intermediary transaction that you could not provide as an associate without an appointment?
I don't know.
What'd you say?
Man, it's after 7.
Seven.
I like it.
Have to say,
I like that answer.
I'm with her on this one, yeah.
I don't know.
It's a Monday after 7 o'clock, and this guy's just talking.
I'm trying to stay awake.
I think I can help you out, Miss Leela. I think I got it.
Go for it, Mr. Keith.
Thank you.
I'm gonna try my best, but I think if an appointment hasn't been made, you can't give like your opinions or give any advice about it. Would that be right?
Got it, 100%. You saved Miss Leela tonight, Mr. Keith. Congratulations.
You sure did, because I'm still reading the question, trying to find the answer.
That's exactly right. You cannot, in that situation, you can't give advice if you're not appointed. So if you want to give advice or things of that nature, you can't do that because you're not appointed. So Keith was right on the mark with that one. Let's see here. Question 3. Mr. Eugene, what is an acceptable way for a salesperson to buy a property listed by the firm? So this, let's put it in layman's terms. I'm selling my own property. I'm the broker. I'm selling my own property, and you want to buy my property from me. What's the best way for you to buy my property? And I'm your boss.
that's a question. I don't know.
It would be in your best interest to represent yourself
Oh, okay.
without being an agent. So you would be a principal practicing by yourself if you're buying it from the broker. Now, if you are happening to Ms. Davenport is selling Mr. Grossman's house, in this situation, you need to end up, there needs to be, number one, you need to notify your broker, and your broker needs to notify Mr. Grossman and explain the situation. Do you see what I'm saying? Because the fact is Ms. Davenport may not fully explain it, so it's in the best interest for me to come into the matter and say, Mr. Grossman, Mr. Eugene, one of my agents, wants to purchase your house. However, I want you to be advised that whatever you have told Ms. Davenport has not been told to Mr. Eugene and will not be told to Mr. Eugene. So in this situation, we can either pull Ms. Davenport out, you represent yourself on your own, Mr. Grossman, or we can leave Ms. Davenport in it, but Mr. Eugene, you may not know anything about what's going on without me being involved. Does that make sense? Okay. Question 4, Mr. Trax. What are several ways in which a dual representation problem can arise in a real estate syndication? Don't let the syndication throw you off. Just think of it as a transaction. What are some issues that a dual representation can arise in real estate?
I would say implied is probably the biggest one. Just
Accidental.
falling into that.
Correct. Could maybe just unintentional happen.
Yeah.
Could Mr. Stephan be in a rush and not fully disclose?
Oh yeah.
So there are a couple of ways that it can happen where it's not intentional, it just happened out of problem. Okay. Let's see here, Miss Davenport.
They keep you there?
Keith, are you there?
Come to our rescue.
Keith, you got another one here.
I'm gonna try. I think I would say at the beginning.
Exactly. He saved you there. Okay, so the first one here. The question next is, should it be
Mr. Keith is the class president.
Now let's make sure you got it down. Now Keith, should it be in writing?
Yes, and I know that part.
She got it.
Yes.
Yes, there you go. There you go. I'm loving this tonight. Y'all are good tonight. All right, let's see. Who else we got over here? Let me come see here. Oh, Miss Sheldon. You there, Miss Sheldon?
Scared now.
Are you first off, are you busy right now? Because I forgot if it was today.
Oh no, I've been double tasking and studying for an exam and listening to all the stuff that's been going on tonight.
Hey, it sounds like you need Mr. Keith to help you with that exam.
Right?
The class president could step in at this point, yes.
That's it.
So, real quick, what can an intermediary tell the seller about the buyer's background and the plans for the property? What do you think, Sheldon?
Is there a button for crickets?
Let's see. Who else do we got here? Enrique.
I believe you can't tell them anything because you have both sides.
Oh, look who came to the rescue.
Wow.
Mr. Darren.
Well, I heard there was a competition for class president.
All right, so Mr. Darren, question for you. What about telling the buyer about the seller's need to sell quickly when the buyer asks, why is the seller selling, or will you give me a negotiating advice? Are you thinking on this one?
Yeah, think about that one. I believe you could tell them why they're selling, but don't give them any negotiating advice.
So you're correct. You cannot give them that. And you can tell them they're selling, but you can only, the best way to say it in this situation is that they're selling, or you can say something like they're motivated. They're motivated sellers. If they ask exactly why, say that's confidential information I cannot disclose. But you can tell them that they are motivated, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, but you can tell them if it's in the disclosure, correct?
Correct. Yes, anything in disclosure can be told to the buyer. By all means, you're right on that one. So guess what, guys and gals? We're going to save the last one for Mr. Enrique, because he loves to be the last one to be called on, you know, especially at 7:30 at night. So, Enrique, you ready?
No.
Being honest. Hey, we have
It must definitely be a hard Monday for everybody.
Yes, it is.
to find out what Keith and Darren's on tonight. We need, they probably have some drinks or something we need to go get, so.
It's Adderall. It's Adderall.
So either Mr. Keith or Mr. Darren, regarding the previous situations, how would the responses change if an appointed associate were to become or begin asked the same questions? Key word there, appointed.
The situation shouldn't change for the associate. He still shouldn't give advice.
Unless, I will add,
I agree.
unless you were appointed to that person. Yes. If you were appointed to that person, you would. But if you were not appointed to it, you're 100% correct. Okay. Well, it depends on who you're appointed to. Okay. Very good question. All right.
So wasn't the original question about the intermediary, which means you have both sides?
Well, yes, you are correct. He was talking about this on this one here, talking about an intermediary. But if you were, say, for example, that I appoint you and I appointed, say, Keith. So, Darren, you were appointed to the buyer and Keith was appointed to the seller. Then in that situation is you would be able to give advice to the buyer and try to find out why the seller's selling.
You and Keith just can't talk to each other.
Right, but you and Keith cannot talk about confidential. So now, now if Keith ended up, if Keith was told by, say, Miss Davenport, who's selling, that she's selling because she needs to get out of town and or whatever, but she doesn't want that to be disclosed, Keith cannot tell you that information. He can only tell you what is allowed by Miss Davenport, which comes back to what you just said, Darren. Yes, that would be correct. Does that make sense?
So in that situation, the broker would be the intermediary and we would be the associates, appointed associates, which
Correct.
then means we can talk to them.
Correct.
That's our client.
That is correct. That is correct. So, y'all are good. Y'all done great tonight, especially 7 discussion questions. That's great. I'm very pleased. Overall, anybody have any questions over the content tonight? I know this is going to be a tricky one. Any questions? We good over there?
We're good.
Good? Good. All right. Well, it looks like we're fine tonight. Everybody's good. Y'all all did great this evening. So we're going to go ahead and call this a class tonight. We will pick back up